year of engagement. And in this particular session, we're going to be discussing maintaining engagement across the different instructional modalities. Okay, so we can go ahead and go to the next one now.
You got it.
So I'd like to start off with just posing a general question of how do you know your students are engaged when you're teaching a face-to-face course? And feel free to unmute, or if you'd rather put it in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with.
Well, if they have eye contact, if they make eye contact and they answer, they participate, then I know they're engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think when students like get excited about what they're seeing and what they're doing, and they are talking to others and collaborating with others, I think that's a good indicator.
For me, it's asking questions, like for my students specifically, because it is a lot of information and then we go into lab. When they ask questions, based on some slides that I just went through or something like that, that I just spoke about, it means that they're actually paying attention and listening to what I have to say. And that shows me that they are engaged as well.
Yeah, definitely. Those questions are a big one for me too. And I always tell my students, I don't believe in stupid questions. I think if it's a question that you have, it's a legitimate question you have. And I would get some really interesting questions, but that also let me know that they're really trying to think about the information and make sense of it based on what their prior knowledge is. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we know what it looks like when our students are engaged in our face-to-face class. How do we know if our students are engaged when we're at a distance? So either a remote class or a fully online class. How do we know that those students are engaged?
That's a lot harder.
Well, I'm on Zoom, so I'm in a remote class. I know they're engaged if they participate in the discussions that we come across, we create. And you also said questions and making comments based on what we teach, all of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with this one, a lot of it appears in the assessments that you do. So if students are not engaged or not understanding, it's going to show up elsewhere rather than their face, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and to go back to my first one, the questions, like I teach midterm and intro to healthcare careers. And so I get a lot of questions based on the readings that they're doing, the discussion questions. So it is still, I mean, it's not everyone, but those that are actually paying attention and engaging in those assignments, they have further questions for me that aren't answered via their websites that they're using and stuff like that. So it is harder because not everyone is as engaged in an online class, like you said, Kelsey. So it can be tricky, but for me, I like the questions, and that even through email or water cooler, being able to answer those and help those students.
Yeah, definitely. So those are some great ways that we know how our students are engaged, even when we're at a distance from them. So let's go ahead and go to the next
question.
So how do you promote engagement of those students who appear to be disengaged, whether they appear to be disengaged in your face-to-face class or they're disengaged from a distance? What are some strategies that you guys have used?
Well, at times I try to reach one-on-one. If like email them, if let's say I do lots of remote classes and less face-to-face, but I email them and try to see if there's a problem, if there's something I can do to help. Sometimes I will tell them about, I can meet one-on-one. So I'm open to them making an appointment and seeing me. And I also want to see if they need a tutor. So I speak to them about our tutoring opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll send I'll send out emails, like even just not picking them out individually, but just as a group or for a class. Hey, just a reminder, we need to, you know, get the discussions done and make sure that they are, oh, hey, sometimes it is just that gentle reminder, like, hey, you're missing some stuff, or make sure that you're getting all those things in. So, and sometimes other students kind of help draw that, you know, too, with discussion questions and comments.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are spot on. So what are some additional ways that we can promote that engagement of those who are disengaged? And it's through that consistent communication and feedback. And it sounds like you guys are spot on with that right now. So we have some additional suggestions that might help bring back those students that seem like they're a little bit too far gone too. I think this is still me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So some different ways that we can ensure that we have consistent communication and feedback, and this is across all modalities. This isn't necessarily specific to just one type of instructional modality, but we can see consistent communication and feedback as being effective ways to engage students in all instructional modalities. And so some ways that we can do that is through fostering a community of learning, diversifying our content, and then offering feedback. So let's go ahead and talk about what we mean by fostering a community of learning first. This is the next slide.
Sure.
Yeah. So when we talk about fostering a community of learning, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to create an environment that is open where students feel comfortable sharing themselves. And one of the ways that we can do that is we share ourselves first. So one of the things that I do when I'm teaching is I try to share some of my likes or my interests or my hobbies with my students. That doesn't mean I'm sharing, you know, incredibly personal information, but by sharing some of those personal things about myself, I am opening up the dialogue to show the students, hey, I'm a person too. I'm not just a robot. I don't live in my office. I have a life outside of work. And that's really important because then you can find ways to connect with them. You know, so like it was always really fun when students found out that I'm a little bit of a gamer and they'll say, oh, well, have you tried this one yet? And we could connect about those things before or after class, which then made them more comfortable communicating with me during class. Another way to foster community of learning is meeting your students where they are. So what do we mean by that? Well, it can mean a couple of different things. Number one, you have to know your audience. So are you working with entry-level non-majors in your field? As a general education type of course, or are you teaching a class where you have upper level students? So we need to make sure that we meet our students at that level. And if we're working with lower level students, we need to bring our language down to a level that they can understand and then build up from there. And another way to meet our students where they are is, what are your students using? You know, are they using Facebook? Are they using Twitter? Are they using, I don't know all the social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are about all I know. But I know that they're using a lot more. So how are your students communicating with others? Could you potentially create a Facebook page for your class to provide some additional announcements or information? I know when I was teaching full-time, I had a very small class, and it was specifically a genetics course for biology majors. And so I had a Facebook page for those students, and I would post interesting stories or podcasts or anything else that popped up in the media that I wanted them to see so that they could understand that science was more than just what we were learning in the classroom. And lastly, another way to foster a community of learning is by varying those student response avenues for discourse. So what we can do is we can diversify that content a little bit and show that there are different ways that we can engage our students, beyond just Zoom or the discussion board, but by offering a variety of authentic assessments as well and assignments, and giving students a choice in their learning. I think this is you now, or is this still me?
It's still you.
Oh, it's still me. Okay. So let's dig a
Well,
little
I
bit
think
deeper.
the last, no, this is me. This is me.
This is
I
you?
think
Okay.
somehow the slides got switched, but
Oh, maybe they did.
yeah. I'm gonna come back to this slide and start with this one and then go back.
Yeah.
So kind of going off of what we're already doing in class in terms of assignments and assessments, the major thing that has consistently across many years of research come back to how you can further engage students is actually feedback. And what we mean by feedback isn't just like you got an A. It's the conversation that you're having throughout the assessment or throughout the assignment, and checking in with students and that final product. John Hattie is a researcher from Melbourne Institute, and he collectively over the course of 25 years has found that feedback is the #1 thing instructors can do to promote engagement in the classroom. And in 2021, some more educational researchers that support his work, and Turnitin.com actually wrote a study in which they investigated which forms of feedback are a predictive and viable resource of improvement in student essays and written responses, which I know many people at the college here use as their assessment and their assignments. So the major finding of this particular study was actually the importance of the questions you're asking within feedback. So where to next, the feedback question. This question is considered to be what they called a feed forward question rather than feedback. The question led to the greatest gains from the first to the final assignment. And then the two other questions, where am I going and how am I going, did a slight improvement in student responses and engagement, and should still be valued, but it's really that where to next question. So interestingly, these are two of the most used questions by educators, the how am I going and where am I going questions. We see that a lot. And when I say where am I going, I mean like a student can literally ask like, how do I move forward in this? Or it can be switched back to the instructor. Where are you planning to go here? How am I doing? How are you doing? It's kind of flipping that. So really the suggestion is to switch your frame of feedback to that where to next. So you completed this. Where do you see this moving on in your research? Where do you see this going forward in your lab work? Where do you envision this moving forward? So this amplifies engagement with the assignment and allows students to expand on the knowledge that they already know. When you are engaging in that sort of feedback, you actually have the opportunity to diversify a little bit more. And Allison somewhat mentioned meeting students where they are, that gives them a different opportunity to present that information. So, TikTok, Snapchat, these are collaborative methods that students are using on a day-to-day basis. Why not give them an opportunity to also present this information in your classes? If this is what they like doing, this is how they communicate with each other, why not modify your current assignments to meet them where they are? I did want to mention playing with the audience and presentations and presenters. I know that nursing is probably a great avenue to do this because in the classroom, as the instructor, your students are presenting to you, but in real life, in nursing, they're not ever going to present to you as the instructor, they're presenting to their patients. And I know the program is filled with obvious on-the-job training, and so they get a lot of that engagement, but flipping that in your mind when you're creating these assignments is another way to amplify and to allow students to engage in that content. The last thing I wanted to mention is we see more and more with COVID and post-COVID world that students are a little bit hesitant to engage in these remote or online settings. And a couple of you mentioned like water coolers and discussion posts and utilizing the chat. That's great. When you do get back to the classroom, you can still use those tools. You don't always have to switch to just a face-to-face group work collaboration. There's a website called Back Channel Chat. It's a classroom discussion tool, and it allows the teacher to control the discussion on the screen, and students who are a little maybe shy to respond to questions forwardly by talking can use this as actually a way to engage in the discussion questions, and you can move it along. It's also data filled, so you can see how many students are responding, the length of their response, and so forth. There are lots of data points on this, and it's completely free. So that's something else, another opportunity. And I think that's it. That's what we have so far. Did you want to add anything else, Dan, there?
Well, I think what I'd like to do now is just open it up, and because I'm sure you guys are probably realizing, oh, I do a lot of these things already. So what are some things that you guys are doing right now in your classroom that involve that feedback to engage those students? Or do you have an idea that you've been toying around with? This could be a good time to workshop that idea with your colleagues and with us.
Or questions?
Yeah, or just questions in general. No pressure.
Oh, one thing I did want to add. I think a lot of us, in the classroom as you're teaching are looking for what's new, what's cool, how do I engage these students to, stay relevant and something sexy. And it's kind of disappointing, but the two main things that you need to do to promote engagement are literally just amplifying your communication and feedback. That's not sexy, that's not cool sounding, but it's what works, it's tried and true, and research shows that those are the two things that you can do. So if you feel like you're good in those, pat on the back, that's excellent, because those are what have been proven to work. There is no magical new 2021 answer. It's actually what we've been doing all along, just a spin on it.
Hey, Allison, I had a question. You mentioned that you did a Facebook group. How did that work with, did you set up a set of rules prior to, like, could they post on things? I guess that's my biggest concern right now with social media and everything that's going on.
Yeah.
With FERPA, with college students, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, students could post on it. And basically I would invite the student. I can't remember, because this was a number of years ago, so I can't remember if it was a page or if students had just friended me on Facebook. But what I did was, I do know colleagues that have set up Facebook pages, and you're not sharing personal information on there. You're not sharing grades or anything like that, or contact information of the student.
Okay.
You can invite the student. It doesn't have to be a requirement, obviously. So if there's a student that chooses not to use that platform, I wouldn't necessarily use it to make course announcements, but I use it to show that science is far reaching. So my particular field is microbiology specifically. And so I would use it to show how microbiology has a reach across different walks of life, different areas of life. And so I would use Facebook as a way to share different forms of media to show students that, this is much more than just being in a classroom and having to study this because, you want to go transfer to a four-year institution, or you're wanting to, I think I was teaching a genetics course for students that were wanting to go to vet school. And so I wanted to show them that it's much more than just an entry-level course to get to the next thing, but that it has a lot of value, and that there's a lot more out there than that. So I would share things like, there was a podcast, the lead singer of the band Offspring happens to have his PhD in microbiology, and he was on a podcast. And
oh
so
my gosh,
I shared that podcast with them because I wanted them to see, like, hey, you can be a rock star and you can still be a scientist. So it was just different ways to share. One of the other things I did was I was teaching a non-majors biology class, and we had a whole section on nutrition. And they were really interested in healthy cooking because that's what we were talking about. So what I did for them was I set up a Pinterest board, and I would just put a bunch of healthy recipes to kind of break them out of their comfort zones of, well, I eat chicken nuggets and French fries. You know, it's like, here's different foods that you can do. And then they took it on as their own, and they created, a couple of the students in the class created a class board, and from there they were able to have everybody add like new or cool recipes. Or what they would do is, there's a lot of infographics out there, so they would put that on the board and go, hey, would you address this, because we don't understand this infographic.
That's
Or
awesome.
or is this infographic, accurate? Or I would have students, one of the things that started the Facebook thing is I had students that had seen some article and they're like, is this accurate? And so I know for myself, I can't compete with Facebook. They're more likely to believe something they see on social media than what I say is the expert in the classroom.
Right.
So let's just face it head on right there on the platform.
I've also seen
Awesome.
Sorry, Nicole.
No,
ahead.
you're okay. You go. No, I was just saying it's awesome. And I love that idea, especially for like med assisting. I mean, there's so much going on in healthcare right now.
Mhm.
And even some of my students, like you said, Allison, they're believing stuff that they're reading online. And it's like, no, that's not true. You have to look at sources, and you can talk to them until you're blue in the face in the classroom, but they have to read it. And if it's maybe on Facebook or Instagram or, TikTok, whatever, they might be more apt to believe it versus what I'm telling them or what they're reading in their textbook. So
I've seen a literal assignments created from this exact discussion. You have students bring in articles that they've engaged with on Facebook, and sometimes you can see that if you're, their friend, and that you teach them literally how to read critically, their digital literacy. How do we know this is true? And have them, bring what they're engaging with on things like Twitter and Facebook. The other thing that I've seen is this can definitely enhance your co-curriculars. So if you see a play, if you, like Allison mentioned, if you see a podcast or something, this is another great avenue for you to post that. And especially if it's a local or, at the Mendel Center or something, it groups of students could say, hey, I'm going to this. Does anyone need a ride? And it can really flourish into many different avenues when it's done correctly.
that's awesome. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Gets the brain going.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that, I use a lot of YouTube because when I teach, I use crash course videos because I'm obsessed with Hank Green. And something that I found is that, again, YouTube is another place where, just like Facebook, anybody can post anything. And so there's a lot of inaccuracies out there. So something else that I would do is I would create curated playlists for my class. And so I'd be like, hey, here's my handle on YouTube. You can go and find, this is the playlist. And it's just a bunch of videos that I've vetted that I make sure are, accurate for students.
I guess I never thought of doing my own YouTube channel because I mean, I have a 17-year-old son who he doesn't watch TV. He just watches YouTube. Heck, my 9-year-old watches YouTube. So that would be a really good way to get some of that. Like I share some YouTube videos even in class. And so that would be a good spot to do that kind of thing, is put share that YouTube channel and do it that way too. That's a good idea.
And TikTok. Like, please find TikTok, use TikTok. That's what kids are doing now. They are all on TikTok. And these
the thought of that just irritates me.
Yeah, but there is science on TikTok, believe it or not. You can find great, critically thought of, accurate, research-based content on TikTok. And if that's where your students are at, meet them there.
That's a good point. I got to get over my abhorrent denial that TikTok is a thing.
Yeah, the YouTube has actually gone down since TikTok has started because it's short clips. You can have a 5-minute clip on TikTok, but they warn you, but it's a minute or less. And I find that students, anything more than a minute, they're like looking
Oh,
around.
the
they're not
ADHD
engaged.
kicks in quick.
It's those
Yeah.
short bites of information.
Yeah,
I like that.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions or things that you're doing you want to mention? If not, we can give you back some of your day. Okay. Well, as always, Allison and I are here to help, to add. If you need a spin on a current assessment or assignment, or you feel that you're seeing those triggers for disengagement in your course, please contact either of us, both of us, and we can definitely help.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.